Hey guys, this is Grond. Thank you for coming to my channel and watching one of my videos. Today we're going to make a video about the Scottish Claymore, and we're going to talk a little bit about different ways to move with the sword, to move your body, different attacks that you can make, different blocks you can employ, and then we'll put it together at the end to walk through a very basic form, after which I'll show you one or maybe two slightly more advanced techniques for a beginner swordsman. And then we'll wrap it all up with some cultural and historical background of not only where this weapon came from, but why and how it was employed on the battlefield. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let's get started. This is the Scottish Claymore. There's some debate in certain historical circles about the naming terminology for these weapons. I'm going to refer to it as a Scottish Claymore because honestly, that's what I grew up calling it, and I think this is the weapon that comes into the minds of most people when they hear Scottish Claymore. The overall length is about 55 inches. The blade, I think, is roughly 42, 43. Here you can see it's cross guard, sloping down with, oh, I forget what these are called. I think they're quillions on the side. Very stereotypical cultural part of this weapon. The ball pommel has a peen across the top to fix it in place. Leather wrap handle, spring steel blade. I don't remember exactly what kind of steel. This is a reproduction of a historical model in a museum. And I have made a little leather wrap right there that you can see to protect my hand when I want to hold the sword, because this is the point of balance. The point of balance is not in the handle because it's too big. The point of balance is roughly in the middle of this leather wrap. It's sharp. It is very, very sharp. That doesn't mean I can't safely hold the edge of the sword, but it just means I don't want to slide my hand along it or I'll cut the junk out of it. It is pointy. This blade was not intended for stabbing just because of the size of this sword. I guess it would fall into the category of broadswords, even though I don't think people would refer to it as a broadsword. It's mostly employed for a slash or cut technique. Yeah, let's get into some attacks. Here you can see my target dummy. It's really not sophisticated. It's literally just 3 paper plates that I have taped to the haft of a spear, and they're representing the head of your opponent, the abdomen of your opponent, and the knee joint of your opponent. Those are going to be the 3 focal areas of our attacks today. We're going to go over 4. No, probably 5 attacks. No, excuse me, 4 attacks. My apologies. We're going to do a strike from our shoulder, like so. We're going to do a strike from above our head, like so. We're going to do a strike from beneath, like so. And then we're going to do a stab, like so. And I know that was quick, but I'm going to go over each one in depth, and we're going to hit each target with each strike. Let's get started. We're going to start with the right-handed shoulder strike to the head. Notice the positioning of my feet. My left foot is forward with my right foot back, since I am throwing the strike from my right shoulder. And I'm going to start out without moving my feet, but as we advance in the video, I'll throw in some footwork, so you guys watch for that. Right-handed shoulder strike to the head. Notice how I'm not turning the blade and smacking it with the flat. I want to hit with the edge because that's the part that does damage. Now to the abdomen. Now to the knee. Notice how my left hand isn't jumping out there because it's not the force of the strike. It's holding the bottom of my sword so that I can pivot and my right hand delivers force. Pretty easy stuff. Let's do it from the other side. Even though I am now throwing a left-handed shoulder strike, my hand position doesn't change. I'm a right-handed swordsman, ergo, my right hand is on the top of the sword. And so without moving my feet, here's a left-handed shoulder strike to the head. Again, notice the position of my blade with the edge hitting the opponent. All right, I think we got that. Let's move on to an overhead strike. For this particular strike, I'm not going to start from this stereotypical stance. I'm going to start from right here, because the way I like to do, you have to generate some power getting the sword up above your head. I'm going to twist and rotate my hands. I'm just pivoting along the central point to get the blade back behind me, rotating my right hand up, down. And I'm stopping at the head because that's where we were striking. And so at the abdomen, boom. Legs, boom. And now I am holding the sword this way. I'm slightly angling it so I can come into the paper plate, but this strike would be done like this because of the direction of force. You're moving the edge into your opponent, whereas with this one, the blade is sideways because that's where the edge needs to be. Now let's do this overhead strike from the other side. Again, same footwork, same hand posture, starting from the bottom. We're going to break our sword in the other direction. We're twisting with our hands. Oh, excuse me, I think I broke the wrong way last time. So, twist, break, rotate, up, down. Twist, break, rotate, up, down. And for a third time. Perfect. Now for the upward strike from the right-hand side. I'm going to go ahead and toss in some footwork because I think you guys can handle it, and I'm tired of not moving my feet. When I throw a strike, I'm going to step into it. So for the shoulder strike, it would be here. For the downward strike, it would be here. You see how I'm moving my right foot forward. I am closing distance between myself and my opponent, and I am delivering more force to the target. So, now to show you the upward strike with footwork. Left foot forward, right foot back, right hand on top, left hand on bottom. We're going to come down. I'm pivoting on my left hand, sweeping the sword diagonally, step up. And so with that, I can hit either of the I can hit any of the targets. Legs, abdomen, head. Now from the other side. All right, I'm in frame. Good, that's always good. We're gonna pivot, sweep, up. It's a little harder because I'm on a heel right here. Pivot, sweep, up, and pivot, sweep, up. Easy stuff. The last strike is a stab. It's really simple. I'm gonna hold the sword here in your normal guard position, rotate it down so it's inside my shoulder because I want the blade close to me in case I have to block, and stab. You can also step with this attack for more range. So we're here, rotate, step. Head. Abdomen. Knee. Pretty easy stuff. I'll show it from the other side now. Rotate, my right hand still on top, left hand still on bottom. Step through. And so what you can see here, from this angle, in this side, my right hand is not in a position to stab. And so as I'm stabbing, I'm opening slightly, and then rotating my hand into a stab position. So I'm here, hand on the opposite side of the blade, twist it down, or rotate it down, move my hand as I stab. Move my hand as I stab, move it again. Easy stuff, and you can step into all of those, of course. All right, now that we've talked about strikes that you can make with this weapon, we're going to talk about 3 different types of blocks that will block the majority of attacks, of normal attacks that people would employ. For the first block, normal stance, looks like this from the side. I'm just facing the camera now because it's easier for you to see the type of block if I'm facing the camera. I'm also going to employ footwork with this, so 2 things at once. I believe in you, you can do it, just keep up. normal stance. Left foot forward, right foot back, right hand on top, left hand on bottom. This block is going to block a strike that's coming in on my head from my left side, my opponent's right side. To do that, we're going to step to meet the attack, or if he was close, we would step back away from the attack to create distance. But for the purpose of the block, I'm going to step forward. We're going to move our hands to rotate the hilt of the blade, and therefore the rest of the blade, to our side and up as we step. What this does is it creates a diagonal bar against the opponent's blade that it has to pass through to get to me. Since it can't pass through your sword, you've then blocked the sword and you know you're good. To show you again, full speed, block, block. And then from the other direction, so if I was already in this stance and there's a sword strike coming this way at me, hands like this, block, just step and block. Notice when I throw my block, I have the edge of my sword pointing to my opponent normally, but I'm not blocking with the edge. I am twisting my sword so that the flat of my blade is facing his edge. What that does is hopefully it blunts his edge with my block, but saves my edge from being blunted. Therefore, so that I can cut him afterwards, which is the purpose of sword fighting. So we'll show those again real quickly. Up block 1, up block 2, easy peasy. Moving on, this block will block a shoulder strike coming from your opponent, so coming from a right-sided shoulder strike from my opponent. I'm here. Excuse me, there's a spider on me, sorry. I'm here. I'm twisting my hands again, just like with the up block, and stepping forward, but instead of blocking here, it's a different strike, so I'm blocking here. Again, this is keeping my entire sword between me and my opponent, and I'm on the inside of his guard as well. This will allow us to employ some counterattacks later on that I'll show you. Now to block the opposite side, we're here, block. All I'm doing is pivoting my right hand and pushing with my left to put that sword in the same position on the other side of my body. Easy peasy stuff. We are not wanting to move the point of our blade to meet the enemy's sword to block it. The reason for this is the enemy can be throwing a feint. And if they're throwing a feint, this block allows me to recover and keeps the point of my sword at my opponent between me and him, which allows me to counterattack, recover into a new block. Doesn't leave me open like this does. All right. The last block is a low block. It's pretty simple stuff. Same stance as before, left foot forward, right foot back, holding the sword. I'm just going to allow my wrists to flip. So my left hand is just coming up, my right hand rotates down, stays on the sword. I'm opening it to allow the sword to fully rotate. I'm going to turn, but I'm not going to step. You see how my foot kind of comes out like a baseball swing? I'm allowing the flat of my blade to hit the opponent's edge, and I've blocked from there to the ground. Block. Now from the other side, we're here, block. It's a little more awkward if you're coming across your body this way, if you're a right-handed swordsman, because your left arm is at an awkward angle. What I like to do is from this stance, or even from this stance, it works better from this stance though, is you just block and rotate down here. If I was caught in this stance on a low strike coming from my right side, my opponent's left side, I would step back out of the way and dodge instead of blocking. And that's a whole nother video of dodging and moving while in a sword fight. I'm just trying to show basic attacks and cuts, which I have done, and blocks, excuse me, which I have done. Now it's time to synthesize that into a basic form. All right, so we're moving into a basic form for this weapon. We're going to start out with just throwing our basic attacks while moving in sequence. We'll turn, throw our basic blocks while moving in sequence, turn again, And then I'm going to do some blocks and counterattacks that I haven't shown you yet, but that I believe you can follow because they're not too difficult. They're just employing the same movements we've already been practicing. And yeah, we're going to see how it goes. So, to start this out, get in my normal sword stance. I'm going to start with a shoulder strike. Right side, left side. So all I did was come up above my head there. Now I'm going to do from this, because we're moving with the form, so I'm here. Now I'm going to do a down strike on my right, down strike on my left, reposition, up strike right, up strike left, turn, and we're going to redo our feet position. Throw an up block, side block, down, down, on both sides of our body. We turn again. Now come the counterattacks. Up, counter. We're going to change form. Up, counter. Side, counter, side, counter, low, counter, low, counter. So yeah, that's the basic form. Practice that if you're wanting to get into swords play, and that shows you the basic attacks and blocks to make with Scottish Claymore. To wrap up this section of the video, we're going to talk about two slightly advanced techniques that I'll show you in just a moment. The first one's called an ox guard. It's when you hold your sword here as a high guard and twist into attacks. The second is a Mordhau way of holding the sword, or a half swording way of the sword, which I hold from my other up here, left hand on the pommel. And what this allows is a much closer, short range technique of fighting that is more useful for indoors rather than outside, where I have plenty of room to swing a big sword as wide as I want. All right, let's get started. The ox guard. Normal sword stance, but instead of here, my hands are up and the sword slants down my body. My point might be low, I need to be higher. I'm not a professional or an expert or anything. But this is the basic stance. And from this, I'm able to block all high strikes and all mid strikes. The only one that I'd have to reposition for would be a low strike if I didn't want to just step away. And what's special about this guard is while blocking all of those, it allows me to block and simultaneously move into a counterattack in a very, very fluid motion. So all these are counterattacks while blocking the entire time. And yeah, that's the ox guard. Wouldn't recommend starting out doing that. It's very taxing on the upper body, and it's kind of an awkward way of fighting if you're not used to it. So I would recommend starting with my basic form that I showed you earlier. Now for the half swording technique. I'm gripping my sword from my leather wrap. Left hand goes on the pommel. Pretty chill stuff. And from here, I have amazing point control. The sword is very, very light comparatively to when it is when I grip back here. And this allows me to very dexterously grab an opponent's weapon, push it aside, and easily counter the stab. There are ways of this where with a gauntlet or a glove, you would actually grab the blade of the sword and strike with the pommel or with the hilt, especially against armored opponents, where striking with the sword blade isn't as effective, just because force is concentrated over a small area. It does a lot more, when force is concentrated over a small area, it does a lot more damage than when it's spread out. And so striking with this piece of the quillin versus this amount of the blade, it's just a much smaller area, so it's concentrating the force much more heavily. Yeah, those are just a couple extra techniques.
Alright, the Scottish Claymore. It's an incredible weapon, and it's a huge weapon, and now it's time to learn a little bit about its history. Historically, it's been used by the Scottish people, hence the name Scottish Claymore. To my knowledge, it was developed in the early 15th century and then used from then until I think the late 17th century, where it just starts to get phased out like many other swords do by other advancements that are being made in warfare. It was primarily used by foot soldiers. It's just too large of a weapon to wield from the back of a horse. And it's interesting because it was deployed by foot soldiers as an anti-horse tool. Oftentimes, when English knights are charging into battle, they're really heavily armored. They have a large lance. They can spear the foot soldier or the opposing knight from a long distance with that lance. And they're hard to kill. Knights are essentially the medieval equivalent of tanks. Not because they are incredibly well armored and slow, far from it. Knights were incredibly fast because horses are incredibly fast, but they are the medieval equivalent of tanks because they're effective, and they have the shock value that normal infantry soldiers just don't have. The Scots oftentimes clashed with the English throughout history. And they needed a tool to beat the English knight that they could rely on. One tool that got developed was the Scottish Claymore. They would deploy it against the English knights to try to either strike the knight down from the back of the horse as he's charging in, or more often, as the horse is running past, they would do a low sweeping cut across the horse's legs, which, for the animal lovers out there, that's really hard to hear. But when you have the English knight, who's incredibly well armored, the big long lance that can spear you from a large distance away, that's the easiest way to stop that unit from doing what it's supposed to do. And then once the horse has been dealt with, not killed, but crippled, the knight's on the ground, it was much easier for the Scottish soldier and 30 of his best friends to then deal with that English knight lying on the ground than when the English knight is running around. Another use that I believe has been documented, I'll have to, I don't know what sources to cite, I'll have to look back into that. Another use, though, for the Scottish Claymore is in fighting pikemen. English pike formations were incredibly effective, and they're based heavily on the ancient Greek phalanx formations. Essentially what you have is just rows of soldiers with really long spears, pikes. It's a specialized weapon for that purpose. And they're great at stopping cavalry charges, they're great at stopping infantry charges, they're just great at stopping charges. And what the Scottish Claymore is claimed to be able to do is when the warrior was able to get close enough to the pike formation, some accounts say that they were able to lop off the head of the actual weapon. It's like the pike itself. I've tested this a little bit before, and yeah, you could definitely cut through like a pretty thick wooden dowel rod, but when it's being held by someone, it has that movement. When you apply force to it, it's going to move some. So I don't know exactly how effective the cutting power would be against the actual spears, even though I know that it can cut through the width of a normal spear. That they have been claimed to do that, but more so past that. When you have the soldiers standing in a row for their pike formation, and you get a really nice, clean, sweeping cut across that row, the stories claim that it can cut off multiple heads at once. And yeah, those were just two quick examples of how the Scottish Claymore was deployed in battle and a little bit of the history behind it. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like and possibly subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.